Hey there. So, this is another behind the scenes tour of how I do stuff. So, this time we're going to look at Seal, the track Violet. This is my micro major obsession with the Roland D50 sound. And Violet by Seal is the first song I really heard this sound on back when it came out. And fell in love with it unashamedly, big fan of the D50 and those era sounds. So this is my session in Studio One, and I'll kind of break it down for you. So first things first, here is the original track, and I just pulled this from my own collection. So, great sound. So, first thing I did was I tempo mapped the song, and you can see all these little micro adjustments. I found this to be a little odd. It's basically 99, 100 beats per minute. And you'd think it'd be rock effing steady because of the drum machine going on in the background. There's some weird timing things going on, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. But when I created the drum beat and lined it up and everything, it definitely started to drift over time. So rather than F with it too much, I just tempo mapped the bit of the song I was going to do. So that's what all this nonsense is in here. Finding the downbeats, tempo mapping it, standard Studio One stuff. If you don't know how to do it, go look at some other YouTube video because there are a ton of them to do it. Right, so that's my guide. Like I did with the Blade Runner, I'm bringing the original track, so I've got something to work with, try to get it as close to tempo as I can, yada, yada, yada. Unlike the Blade Runner one, which didn't really have much of a tempo, this one clearly does. So part two of that was then getting just the vocals. I used, Moises? I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, Moises AI, to do the separation. You could do a certain number of free ones per month or something like that. I don't use it very often, but that's what I use to extract Seal's vocal out. And if I kill off all the effects processing, we get, let's try this again. We get this.
You comb your hair in different light. You change the chair and seem to
pretty clean. Frankly, I'm amazed at how well AI can strip out vocals. It's also kind of frightening how easily it can do it. Anyway, so all I did for Mr. Seal was, let me turn all these back on. Cut out some low-end rumble. Wasn't really present in his vocals, but it was, well, it probably wasn't there for his original vocal track, but when it separated it out from the file I had, there was some low-end nonsense coming on. A little bit of fresh air from Slate, the fresh air plugin, little high-end stuff. And then some UAD, there it goes, UAD compression. I'm probably over compressing, but whatever. This isn't rocket science. So adding all those back in, I think, and I'm sending his vocals, what am I doing? Yeah, I'm sending his vocals to a reverb. That's just one of the stock open air ones. Oh, that's right, I upgraded. So this is Studio One 6.5 point something or other, so I'm still getting used to it. Anyway, so this is the new open air for what it's worth, and this is just bright plate. So it's plate verb with some tweakies. I think I did. Yeah, I did the. Wow, this is cool. I did the Abbey Road trick, which is you shelve off like 600 and below, and then what is it, 10K and up. And this kind of gets the reverb out of the way of the vocals. It cuts off a lot of the low end, so it doesn't get too boomy. Cuts off a lot of the high end, so it doesn't get overly sibilant. It just makes the verb sit in a nice sort of pocket with the vocals. So if we listen to just the vocals with the EQ and the compression and the verb.
Ooh, watch you comb your hair in different light. You change the chair and seem to think that's alright.
So not too much, but is what it is. So vocals out of the way, let's cut to the chase, because that's probably what you're really here for. The soundtrack sound. So Roland D50 comes out. It's the DX7 killer. Prior to this, DX7 comes out. It's the digital synth. Totally impractical to understand if you came from a traditional analog synthesis background. No knobs, sliders, totally different thing. Only a few people actually really knew how to program it well. I was not one of them. So DX7 comes out, and it's freaking everywhere, because the DX7 has a sonic character that nothing else had at the time. And because so few people could program it, it's why you hear all those sounds. The electric piano in particular, the Taco Bell sound, frickin' everywhere, because they were just go-to sounds. They did the job. Anyway, enter the Roland D50, their weird LA synthesis keyboard that had like digital samples of transients that then they would splice onto the front of digitally generated waveforms, and go look it up. Anyway, patch 37 evidently on an original D50 is called Soundtrack. This sound exists in a couple places. It's been on a few keyboards before, but this is the one I think most people recognize. I think it was on the JX10? Don't hold me to this. Anyway, it's existed before under some similar names, but this is the one that I think everyone went, ooh, because it is a really amazing sound. Something else I was going to say pertinent about it. Anyway, yeah, that's it. There's actually a soundtrack patch in the General MIDI spec. It's not this one. It doesn't sound exactly like this one, but it's in the General MIDI spec. Pretty cool. So let's cut to the chase. Here is, as we wait for the GUI to warm up. Here it is. My D50 soundtrack-ish. And it helps if I unmute it. So, oi. Was ist los? There we go. That's pretty close approximation in my ear. Revealing my horrible keyboard playing skills. So, this took a while to build. It was, I don't remember the original patch I found that I started with, but there's a patch in here, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the notes. But there's a patch within Pigments that had a lot of this kind of going on. It didn't sound like this, but it was sonically similar enough that I'm like, hey, that sounds a lot like Soundtrack from the D50. So then I started playing with it, and the more I played with it, the closer I got, and I went through a bunch of different versions. This is the final one, but there was like 1 through 7. Kept trying to improve it and tweak it and improve it and tweak it and so forth and so on. This is the one I finally landed on. This is the one that's on my Google Drive for those of you who want to grab it. So the original one, as I understand, was built around square waves and the filter and all that. I didn't use that this time. So part one, let's just do this through. It's using the harmonic engine, and so that's the low part. The thing about soundtrack is it's two different sounds, and they're tuned a fifth apart, or 7 semitones, depending on what book you're reading at the time. So you've got the low part, and then a fifth up. The high part, turn them together, you get the crazy chords. So bear with me, I'm going to try to do a little theory here. So if you just play something like a C minor, here's your C minor triad. If you add the fifth, I believe what you then end up getting is a C minor 7 add 9 chord. Don't hold me to it. My theory is pretty shite. But so if that's C minor turning on the fifth part of the engine, gets you that cool sound. And then the last part of it is the utility engine. That's this one. And it's just backing up, giving me a little more of that, I don't know what to call it, squee sound. And it goes squee that the original had. I know that's really descriptive and really helpful. But you turn all three of those on, and pretty damn close. As close as I think I can get. If you want to download the patch, load in Pigments and F with it and get closer, do it. That would be awesome. So once I got that sound together, as with all things, it was just listening to what he's playing. I had kind of figured it out, and just worked my way through, going back, listening to the original, and listening to what I played, and listening to the original, and so forth and so on. So in isolation, soundtrack, turn off his vocals. So this is just the Pigment doing the soundtrack sound. That's at the beginning. The real soundtrack patch on the D50 is very velocity sensitive. This one, not as much. So, not terribly difficult. It's not like a major league. Yes, Arturia, I know. So that's what's going on there. The next step, at least in kind of how I built it, was getting the drums, because I needed the click. So let's just take a quick look at those. I have them listed here as 808. It's not 808 really. I'm using the 909 kick. I think that's a 505 snare. It may be an 808 snare. I don't remember. And then the various hi-hats. Just that, and that's like it for the drums. EQ wise, what am I doing? The hat and the hi-hat, I've got pretty severely EQ'd, rolling off all that low end, basically down to 5K. And then the snare, 100K roll off, give or take, for the snare. So if we listen just to those, I do have some automation on here, bringing in the drums, bringing in the drum reverb, and then I don't think there's a master fade, but then there's a fade out at the end. So that's kind of what this nonsense is. So if we listen to just the drums, and they fade in like on the original. close, super close. Again, critical listening, just listening to the track and really focusing in on just what the drums are doing. And I would loop a section of the track, the original, so I could try to get, okay, what's the hi-hat doing? Because it's a weird hi-hat pattern. What's the kick doing? Yada, yada, yada. If you listen on the original hi-hats all the way in the left, and then there's a shaker all the way in the right. I have a really good shaker loop from something I grabbed years ago from a recording session. So add those two together, it fades in. That's what this little fade in there is. You get so pretty damn close. So let's turn on Mr. Seal's vocals, soundtrack, and just the 808, the drums, and the shaker. So that right there is the bulk of the song, at least component-wise. Pretty straightforward. So then let's jump into this thing that I have just called lead. This is this weird little sound that comes in right after the beginning of the track. There's this little vocal nonsense, and it's right before the start of the first verse. It's a strange sound. Let's hear it just on its own here. Turn off all this other nonsense. It's a lead sound, but it's got a lot of delay on it, and the delay is way, way louder than the actual sound itself. So the sound itself, I've had to push back in time so that the echoes would happen on beat and not after. I'll play it here in a second, because if you listen to the original track, you can hear the first notes of this little weird little line happen, and it goes like da da da. It gets really, it echoes, but the echoes kind of get louder instead of going da da da. So it's this weird kind of thing. Anyway, it's this little bit. So yeah, there's a ton of echo in there, probably a bit more than I need. But this, I don't know if I call it cheating or not, but I grabbed the original part from the full song, cut it out of the guide track, brought in and time stretched it till it was twice as long. So then it played half as slow, and then I could figure it out, because I couldn't figure out exactly what was going on, and basically then sat there and bit by bit by bit constructed it, and then shoved it back until it was the right time. So in context again, turn the drums on, our little shaker, and Mr. Seal's vocals. And it's pretty close to the original. I think it's sonically a little different, but here's the original. I think that's also D50. Frankly, I think like the whole of this track is like D50. I don't know for sure. Obviously, soundtrack is, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the other sounds from this track are D50. At least that's what I think. Don't sue me. So, we've got the vocals, we've got the soundtrack, we've got the 808 drums, the shaker. Then the last thing sort of to tackle was the fretless. Because there's a fretless bass in this. Again, not a real fretless. I think it's D50. Not a lot going on. Again, I found a patch in Pigments that sounded pretty close, and then just kind of effed with it until I got what I was looking for. This uses 2 different samples. A classical guitar is the bulk of it. And then this Fuhara? I don't know. This sound is a higher sound, and it kind of gave me that real Jocko-esque, without being Jocko, but a good fretless sound. Then you see this other one here that says also fretless. This is actually the old Synth 1 plugin. I use this plugin a lot. It's really good for some things. And in this case, it's adding a little sub-bass oomph to the whole thing. The fretless in and of itself was a little light. And I also noticed in the track, there was some other bass sound going on in addition to the fretless, particularly when you get in the little licks, like this one right here, this little... there's another, in the original, there's another bass going on, in fact. I just play it for you instead of just telling you what it's there. So, around here. Oop. Particularly when the vocals kick in, there's another sort of bass sound buried in there. I thought the fretless on its own was a little light, so I just doubled it for the most part with this other sound. On its own, not a lot, but together gives it just a little more oomph. Yeah, it's what? A square wave and a sine wave and then a sub-osc. Really low filter, double unison, some chorus. And then I didn't do the lick with the analog fretless, just the Pigments fretless. And the same trick, I did the same thing when I did with the lead sound, is grab that one snippet of where the bass solo comes in, and bass lick comes in, stretched it out to twice as long so I could figure it out. Cheating or not, I don't know, you decide. And then there's another one down here, and some pitch bend to imitate sliding on fretless. Again, it's not a real fretless on the recording. It's probably a D50 patch. God knows what it is. After that, I think I came back in with the piano, which comes in, let's turn on his vocals, comes in here.
Now I look at you in different light.
And the piano is essentially doing what soundtrack is doing.
I understand. You need a change. And when you make that change, then the world will elevate you. And if I told you then that I
So again, on its own. the fretless. Figured this out just by ear, and it, believe it or not, it's Arturia. It's a good sounding piano. I'm not a real piano player. I was just going for the sound that worked. I think this has got some, yeah, a little low end dip and some high end punch, just again to fit it in the mix and get it to sound kind of like the original. Let's see, after that, well, there's this Latin stuff that comes in partway, well, what I've called Latin. Right here, turn his vocals back on.
When you take those, there's no shame. So when you take those tears, don't look to see I'm alright.
So, some congas come in. Mute the other stuff. Some congas come in / bongos. It's kind of hard to tell because there's some pretty high notes. And then this other weird sound. So the drum, the congas / bongos, that's this. And built-in Latin percussion kit in Presence XT, the default sampler inside Studio One. That's my best guess at what they were playing. Don't know if it was real or not. The other sound that's in here is this goofy one. For those of you who've been at this long enough, you'll definitely recognize that as the CR78. That is a unmistakable CR78 kind of sound. For this, I'm using an old throwback, Waldorf's Attack. It does a really great CR78 imitation. And I've had this forever and a day. Had the previous version way back in the day. So I ended up using this because I heard that sound. I'm like, that's the CR78. I know that sound. Probably even other Roland drum machines at the time. But it definitely, I heard it went, I've got that. So the CR78, the Latin congas, and then the 808 drum machine kind of doodad get you. And that goes, I believe, throughout most of the rest of the song. Let's see, what other nonsense is there? There's the strings, which come in. I'll turn his vocals back on for a little help.
Now I look at you in different light. A violet unicorn, to me that's alright. I understand.
On their own, doesn't sound all that great. Spitfire Audio, the original, the epic strings. But in context with everything else, turn the piano on, strings, all our fretless nonsense sound. Just unmute everything but the original track. No. There we go.
Now I look at you.
Turn the bass back on. So here's where, sorry about that. Here's where the strings come in after the little fretless bass lick.
Now I look at you in different light. A violet unicorn, to me that's alright. I understand. You need a change, and when you make that change, then the world will elevate you. And if I told you then that I could cry, would you take my tears and watch the sunrise. A man afraid.
So no big deal, just string sound. On the recording, it's definitely not real strings. It's definitely some sort of samply. It could be emulator. It's Trevor Horn, so got to throw Fairlight out there. Could be Fairlight. I don't know. I wasn't trying to mimic the exact sound for this, so I just grabbed a string patch that I thought would work well. The other last couple of bits and bobs is this flute sound, which only happens here towards the end.
When you take those tears, don't look to see.
On its own, really just kind of a weird line, but in context.
When you take those tears, don't look to see I'm alright.
And again, would you believe? That's right, it's Pigments. Again, this is based on another patch I found that was really close. Just using the analog. Was it two oscillators? Yeah, only 2 oscillators out of this. The sort of Oberheim SEM filter style. Nothing fancy with this one, but it's what's in there. And then I think the last little bit of nonsense in here is what I lovingly refer to as Chiff. I'm not sure what sound this is. It's really low in the mix on the original. I think it might be another. It sounds kind of like Soundtrack, but not. Like maybe Soundtrack played with a really, really short velocity. As I said earlier, the patch Soundtrack, the real one, is very dynamic. It responds to velocity quite a bit. So if you play it really light, it's dark and mellow. And if you dig in, much brighter. It's a weird little sound anyway. So again, on its own, it's kind of fluty, but in the original, it's got a real Chiff kind of sound at the beginning of it. So I tried to put together something. It kind of follows, like if I turn his vocals on.
You change the chair and seem to think that's alright. I understand you need a change. When you make that change, don't look to see I'm alright.
So it shows up a little bit in like the vocal or the first and second verse. It may show up later. I only did the first some odd measures of the song, because after here it gets into this sort of long improv section, and I just couldn't be bothered to recreate the whole thing. This is the meat of the song, and I just wanted to get that. So that's what it is. It's a fair amount of stuff, and then just some automation. But when you roll it all together, make sure the original's off, it sounds pretty damn good.
don't seem to think that's alright. I understand you need a change. When you make that change, don't look to see I'm alright. Now that I look at you in different light, a violet unicorn to me, that's alright. I understand you need a change, and when you make that change, then the world will elevate you. And if I told you then that I could cry, would you take my tears and watch the sunrise? I'm afraid there's no shame. So when you take those tears, don't look to see I'm alright. When you take those tears, don't look to see I'm alright. How can I tell you? How can I explain? I want your love. I really change in me.
And there's our fade out. So that's basically it. I just noticed as I was playing it, there's this weird here on the vocals. God knows what that is, particularly since this has been AI extracted from the final mix. Anyway, that's how I put it together. This is all done by ear. Critical listening, that's why I kind of do these. They're fun to do. They're exercises in can I get the sound? Plus, I just love the D50 soundtrack sound. But also just trying to see if I can do it. And this is what comes out. So, there you go. Hope it was informative. Here endeth the lesson.